Welcome back, I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we're driving one of the most special 911s of all time. This is the 2014 911 50th Anniversary Edition, and some say this is their favorite 911. A lot of people actually see this car now and say, that's the one I'd have. It's a 991.1 generation, so it's powered by a 3.8-liter naturally aspirated flat 6. It was available in a 7-speed manual transaxle or the 7-speed PDK. This one is PDK, and I think that's the right move for this generation of cars, frankly, because PDK really came into its own in the 991 generation. It's not something I'd necessarily recommend in 997 early PDK cars, but the appearance package of this 50th anniversary is really what makes it ultra special. This is a spec that you just couldn't get any other way. The first thing you probably notice about the 50th anniversary are these wheels. You get the Sport Classic Fuke wheels that are reminiscent of what was on the earlier cars. And that's a really difficult thing to do. Doing retro styling on a modern car is not always the most tasteful looking thing. But these 20-inch Sport Classic wheels are wrapped in 245 section rubber up front and 305s in the rear. But something else you'll notice is this is not a narrow body Carrera. This has the wide body from the Carrera 4S. So it gets a little bit wider in the rear, which makes those 305s look absolutely proper. You also get the chrome accents around the body, and that correlates to the rear as well, which normally would not be my favorite thing, but somehow on this car it just works. You get the 911 50 badge in a few different places, but really the interior is where this car all comes together, because Houndstooth Seats. Oh yes, this looks fantastic, and this is big money stuff when you were talking about trying to get something special from Porsche back in the day. Now a lot of people like to go in an aftermarket way, put in seat inserts, whether it's tartan or houndstooth or any kind of little patterns. It's great, but to get this properly from the factory was really a rare thing. It carries over to the rear as well, so you've got the Kinder seats in the back, which you can fold down into a little parcel shelf, which is wonderful. And I think, honestly, I just love the way these seats operate. They seem easier than even the modern cars, because you get it in 992, and sometimes they have those leather pulls, and they're just a little cumbersome. These cars, everything just worked with ease, and that's something I'm sort of missing. On the headrest, you also get the embroidered 911 50th, and up top, a beautiful clear moonroof. We love to see it. This has the deviated stitching all throughout, and that's what I'm saying is this car just has all of the proper luxuries. But the absolute best thing about this vehicle, the gauge cluster. Check out the throwback with the green dials, the silver capped needles. All of this looks so good. And this is number 1222 of 1963, of course, because it's commemorating the year 1963, the first year of the 911. Even get your Sport Chrono Pack in that green as well. So this is all really special stuff. Let me just show you in the back, because you still can see a little bit back here. It's mostly just fans and oil, but one of the big things about this car is you had the exclusive power kit. So this made 430 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque. But don't forget, before the turbos, boy oh boy, did these things sound the business. So let's get out there and take it for a ride, because I'm really excited to drive the 50th anniversary 911. Over here, we've got our left start ignition. I love the way these things jump to life. Super rev happy and excitable, but we also have our sport exhaust. Turns up the dial a little bit, and it has a little bit of raspiness on the D-cell, which is great, but it's not like pop, 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 pop. It's not in your face. It does the job. We've got the old style PDK steering wheel, which is pretty minimal in terms of buttons. However, you can upshift and downshift on either side of the steering wheel. So this pushes forward and back the same as on the right side, unlike the later wheels, which ended up with a downshift paddle and an upshift paddle. Something else that's a little bit, let's say, backwards is that when we put our PDK into manual mode, forward is an upshift, backward is a downshift. That was changed because the more natural way, or more colloquial or conventional way to do it, is to pull back for an upshift and push forward for a downshift. These things kind of got sorted out, but this shows you that this was kind of in the discovery phase of making everything work the way we'd like. Let's set off. We'll put it in Sport Plus, and you'll notice that that gets the revs up a little bit and puts the Sport Plus illumination on our steering wheel. Let's see how she gets off the line. I think this is the perfect level of power and traction for these cars. Now, this isn't a GT car. It's not a GT3. It's certainly not an RS. It's honestly like a luxurious daily driver version of a sports car 911, and it does the job so perfectly well because it still gives you that squirminess, and despite being relatively cold and salty with a fairly low grip, having that rear engine design still puts enough weight over those rear tires to maintain traction. I don't know that if we were in a front engine vehicle right now, we would have had such a simple time getting off the line. And that's where these 911s really come into play, as just being wonderful getting off the line light to light. No nose lift, but we still get over the bump. We'll be courteous of the runner here. The sound. I do think this 3.8 liter was kind of peak modern 911. I still prefer, I think, 997 to this. Maybe that's just because I yearn for the past. But in terms of like usability and just really mixing modern sports car energy with kind of old school vibes, this is it. This is as good as it gets. And yes, everything is faster now. Everything has more torque. You've got cars with all kinds of technology in them to make them put those numbers down. But I will happily sacrifice torque and horsepower and tunability for this sound and this character, because there's just nothing like a naturally aspirated Porsche. Love the way the power comes on in these things. They feel so fantastic. you get on a highway in a 911, you're reminded that they have fantastic visibility, that this is a car that was designed to be driven, used, not feeling like you're in some cocoon and isolated from the outside world. You're part of it. And it means a lot to me as someone who jumps in and out of a lot of cars to get in a car that was designed for visibility and actual awareness of the outside world. That makes driving easier. As we're cruising here, I'm also noticing that this is a great size for a 911. I think I always look at the 997 as the ideal size, but look at that. Oh, this thing rules. This is a really good 911. But it really meets the requirements of kind of being a daily driver today, because you don't feel like you're gonna die in it. Like, every time you get in little cars now out in the real world, surrounded by monster SUVs, it can be a little intimidating in terms of navigating regular traffic. The 997, I think, really hits the size just right, but this car, it fits in and still feels like a tight little package. Porsche's goal for PDK back then was to not even need to use the manual shifting action. They wanted the car to just know. And it'll hold your gear for a little extra longer in case you were approaching a corner, coming out of a corner. But if we turn it into sport mode, it'll just dial that back a little bit. Something I like about 991 is that it is an honest sports car. Despite all of the luxuries I have, I've got deviated stitching, I have a leather dashboard, I've got heated seats, I've got all kinds of nice things to make me feel like I'm in an expensive car that wants me to be comfortable, but there's still some road noise. You know, it's not here to be a Bentley, it's here to be a Porsche. Just feels so tight. Remember, when 991 came out, people were up in arms about EPAS, electric power assisted steering. Oh God, they got rid of the hydraulic rack. And yes, it was a different feel, for sure. But honestly, this is such a tight little car. It feels fantastic. And it is kind of funny to think that people were up in arms about how this car felt, because today I'm honestly thrilled. I'm like, looking back, this steering feels fantastic. I get that relative to a 997, it's different, but this is no cause for concern or anger. Early PDK would hit pretty hard. Look at this, 7th gear, cruising at about 65 miles an hour, 1800 RPM. I'm not gonna call her a fuel sipper, but it's certainly gonna be relatively efficient. When you give those downshifts and it rev matches, you can hear it cracking that throttle open. And there's still a great connection between that engine and the cabin. So you're part of it. It's not separated from you. It's not trying to isolate, which unfortunately I think is what ends up happening in a lot of modern cars. And now you have to spend big money to kind of get any of that experience. Remember, an NA Porsche now is going to be a GT3. And 992.2, you're paying over $200,000 for that car. So, not saying you have to run out and get the 50th anniversary edition because it'll cost you a bit of extra scratch, but what I am saying is Carrera S is a great car, and that means you could go and get yourself a 991.1 Carrera S and get a pretty immersive experience sports car thing without absolutely obliterating the bank. Do you need a GT3? Maybe not. Maybe you need to not overlook some of the lower end cars, because a lot of those lower end cars back in the early 2010s were actually giving you the things you wanted out of a GT3, be it a manual transmission or a naturally aspirated flat six. Keep in mind, you could not get a manual transmission in a GT3 when this car came out. 991.1 did away with the manual GT3, and here we are. 991.1 911R comes out with a manual. It's a touring, essentially, before the touring. It's an RS, it's wingless, it's got a manual transmission. People go nuts, the prices go bananas. Porsche starts to realize, wait a minute. People do want this experience. Just because our cars are faster doesn't mean that they're necessarily better. People want to row their own gears and have that experience. Should we be taking this away from them? They changed their mind. They brought us the touring and the regular 991.2 GT3 with a manual gearbox. They gave us a 6-speed. And here we are. It's still available today. And by the way, you can thank the Americans for this, because it was the American market that truly drove the demand for that manual gearbox. So everyone likes to complain that Americans ruin the car industry, or that we don't know what we're talking about, or that we can't drive a manual. It's like, well, guess what? No Americans, no manual GT3. Something that's always a real treat about 911s is their turning radius. Now, we do have a little bit of a snowbank up here, so we may not make it, but look at that. Still does the job. That's fantastic. These are so maneuverable and easy to live with on a regular basis. I remember when Andy Pruniger was talking about PDK, and one of the reasons he loved it so much was because it could kind of play songs that you couldn't play with a manual transmission. It can hit these notes in a really specific way where it changes so immediately. And I always thought that was really charming, that those are the things that he's looking for, that those are the things that kind of inspire them. But I will say that these engines, these naturally aspirated 3.8s, sound far better than what's coming out today. And I do love a 911. I'm not here to like say, oh, everything new is bad. I'm just saying, like, objectively, this is a better experience as a driver in terms of auditory feedback. The new cars are ludicrous. They're fast. You could get a base Carrera, tune it, and essentially have more power than any turbo up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And that's like, it's insane. Whereas I don't need that. I'm okay taking the slower option that I can ring out to redline over and over and over again if it means that I get to hear this. I don't remember PDK hitting this hard back in the day. Like, that actually is like, whoa, that's a good shunt into the next gear. That's fun. I mean, PDK has done such a good job of smoothing things out over the years to be like, okay, you can upshift and downshift mid-corner and it won't upset the car, but that's essentially drama-free, which for speed is fine, but for actual like entertainment, I'm pretty shocked at how ludicrous this car is. Rear-wheel drive, naturally aspirated flat 6 911. That's the ticket. That's heritage. That is why this is the 50th, and they didn't make this some all-wheel drive thing. I'm in love. I've always admired these cars, but I don't think I ever really got them. And at this point now, I think it makes a lot of sense. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Let me know if the 50th was always on your radar, if it was something that you cared about, or if it looked like just, oh, you're paying for fancy seats and things. Because right now, I'm realizing that this car is definitely greater than the sum of its parts. And my friend Will Lee of PTSRS, oh my goodness, look at all this salt. Luckily, this thing has full PPF. We're in the clear. But Will Lee has always been a huge proponent of this car and always pointed them out to me. And I got it, but I didn't get it. Now I really get it.